We'll go to our Vice Chairperson, Pauline Tully, and then back to our witnesses. So, Pauline.
Thank you, Dahirlach, and good morning to everyone, and thank you for coming in here to present to us this morning. Again, very, very informative presentations, a lot of content, a lot of detail there, and a lot of issues which caused concern. As both of you are DPOs, and one of you specifically representing women, but other represent both men and women, I'm just interested in your experience of consultation with various groups, because one of the cornerstones of the UNCRPD is consultation with DPOs and with disabled people. And I'm wondering, have you been consulted on, for example, the independent cost of disability? That review was carried out or published last year, and we are being told that its findings are being considered and hopefully addressed. And so I'm just wondering if you've been consulted with, and if so, what your recommendations are, and if you haven't, still what your recommendations would be, because you should be consulted. The same with, I know you mentioned there, the National Disability Inclusion Strategy only mentions women, I think, once, and the Comprehensive Employment Strategy for People with Disability doesn't mention women at all. So again, you know, they're quite concerning, especially as the unemployment rate for disabled women is considerably lower than the employment rate for women with disability is considered lower than that of men. It's low in general for disabled people, but it's lower again for women. And why is that? Why is there such a discrepancy there? I suppose there's been quite a focus again on domestic and gender-based violence of recent times, and again your indication that women with disabilities are much more, even women, like I think it's 1 in 4 women will endure or encounter violence, but yours is even higher. You're saying that disabled women are a higher number among that. So again, have you been consulted on anything for the national strategy that's on domestic and gender-based violence that's about to be announced? Have you been consulted on that? And again, a lot of that seems to be coming to the, I suppose that your disability payment is means tested, and therefore if you're in a partnership or if you're in a marriage, you become almost reliant on the person, and that makes it harder to leave. So just if you address those points, I realise the time is short, but thank you again.
Thank you, folks. I'll try and do a whistle-stop tour, and I'm sure the other folks here can help me out with that. One very specific thing in regards to fertility treatment, the legislation which is currently proposed on fertility treatment explicitly allows mostly private clinics to discriminate based on disability. So, of course, cost is a major concern that we would have, but also there's that element of discrimination there. And under the CRPD, under Article 23, disabled people do have a right to have a family and to be supported in having a family. To go through some of the other things, we would indeed agree with a reinstatement of the mobility allowance. Having the ability to get around is, you know, one of these kind of cornerstone issues. Having access to transport is one of these cornerstone issues that can help facilitate a lot of these other can help improve a lot of the other problems. In terms of cost of disability and cost of living, we know that the cost of living is, you know, increasing and ever increasing. We know that disabled people are particularly impacted by that. We have called for a essentially just stopping means testing of disability allowance payments, and essentially making disability allowance a cost of disability payment. And there is indeed a precedent for this within Irish legislation, in that we have something called the domiciliary care allowance, which is wholly inadequate, but it is a payment given to the carers of young disabled people that is not means tested. It is specifically to cover the cost of disability. But for some reason, when somebody turns 16, suddenly we expect the cost of the disability to be absorbed within payments relating to just general cost of living, which makes no sense to me. Then the final thing that I will speak about is consultation. The consultation processes in recent months have been not entirely inclusive of disabled people and disabled persons organisations. There's a couple of specific examples that we could point to. Recently, some of you folks were part of the discussion process around the assisted decision-making amendments bill and the codes of practice for the Disability Support Service, which is part of the ADM. In both of these situations, the consultation process was not accessible, just simply not accessible. Materials were not provided in accessible formats, the time frame was incredibly short, and we were not supported basically to be part of these processes. And this is something which we're seeing kind of across the board, and we would have significant concerns around that. And then if there's other folks who'd like to speak to.
I just wanted to add to what Amy had said there, just kind of expanding it, just kind of a little bit more specific detail to your questions there, Pauline. For the Indicon report, no, we were not directly consulted with. We did, of course, promote it to our membership and get as much involvement as possible, but we weren't directly approached. Similarly to the third national strategy on domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, we were involved in the consultation, but because we actively pursued it. Disabled Women Ireland, as the only gender-based DPO in the country, were not approached. So we are finding that a lot. We are receiving more requests for consultation, but there is a lot of concerns around the consultation process, including that there's no commitment to what that means. We have taken part in very time-consuming consultation with various branches of government and semi-state bodies, and none of our recommendations or feedback has been taken on board, and we've had absolutely no response as to why or anything else. So another concern is not just the consultation, but that the consultation process is actually robust, and that we can see what's happening there. There's also we've received literally no support for consultation as required under the CRPD. Disabled Women Ireland is entirely run by disabled volunteers on an entirely unfunded basis, and that will limit our ability to engage in the required level of consultation for implementing the CRPD, particularly as the means testing, we're all disabled, it affects us very directly. If we do secure funding, we cannot pay our members for the amazing amount of hours and work they put in, because it might cost them their disability support. So this is actually an issue that will affect the entire implementation of the CRPD in Ireland directly. And just in regards to the right to a family and assisted human reproduction, the alarms have been sounded that disabled people are not fully included. In fact, disabled women are still in this country being put on long-term contraception against their will and without their consent. And we're finding there's still a huge gap between guidelines and legislation and actual practice. So there are guidelines saying that discrimination against disabled people in fostering or adoption or in all these other areas is not permissible. However, in practice, it's not there on the ground, and most of the people working on the ground seem completely unaware that discrimination is not actually upheld by law, and they think that it's a valid reason. So we're very concerned about these areas.
I'll be brief. I just want to refer to Mary Stephen Carney's comments on transport, because transport is one of the 4 pillars of independent living, housing, personal assistant, transport, and the accessible environment. Because if you can't get to work, then that's an issue. In relation to ways to, for example, if somebody wants to. I know there are supports in terms of the VAT back and of fuel and the initial cost of a vehicle, but it's still enormously expensive if it's your first, if your first job. So I'd like, if programs that they run in the UK, like Motability, where you can lease the vehicle. You may never, you don't own the vehicle, but you have the benefit and use of it, in an affordable fashion. In relation to the changes in the, it's become much more difficult to get the primary medical cert in order to get the concessions on the purchase of a vehicle. I know that there were abuses in the past, but it's gone to the other extreme now. Like it needs to be more nuanced. In relation to consultation, again with ILMI, in relation to the cost of disability. The information was sent out to members, but the organisation itself was not directly consulted with. So that's just.
Aoife?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I suppose I just wanted to pick up on an important point I think that was made during the submission, but just it's in relation to like the means testing and the financial vulnerability of disabled women, and I think that this leads to disabled women not partaking in the community, and which really leads to isolation, which in turn leads to more vulnerability when they may experience gender-based violence. So I think that this kind of how we're really, I suppose, isolating disabled women from society really needs to be addressed and really needs to be concerned. And we are creating this by means testing, disabled women. We are isolating women and making, them more at risk for many things. And so I just wanted to raise that point as well.
Just to reiterate what Disabled Women of Ireland and Nicola have said already, and I suppose, for me it all comes back, like as a disabled woman, it comes back to choice, to make sure that actually people have, and disabled women have, those choices in their lives to make the decisions that actually directly affect them. Because I think at the moment, there's an awful lot of barriers that are put in place, and disabled women simply don't have as much choices to actually live our lives independently. Now, again, I appreciate that everyone's circumstances are different, but again, just to reiterate, about the disability allowance, it is a shame that, it is means tested, and, there are some disabled women like myself that, I don't have the disability allowance because I'm privileged to work in a full-time position, but for other disabled women that, receive that payment, again, I would echo what Disabled Women of Ireland have said, and just to really emphasise that the means tested, it does a lot more harm than good, and that really needs to, I suppose, be pushed down the line. And I think there does need to be more engagement with disabled persons organisations, and again, independent movement. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to speak on this issue with Disabled Women of Ireland as another disabled persons organisation. But I think, and just to echo what Nam said about the consultations, that it's one thing to have those consultations, to be in those spaces, but a lot of the time it's because we as disabled persons organisations, we have to kind of really fight to be there and kind of to be in the room. So it's great that consultations have taken place, theoretically, but then implementation is another serious issue. So I think there needs to be a lot more implementation of these issues that we're discussing today, and again, just to say that we welcome the opportunity to be here, but it's highlighting a very serious issue that we all face. So thank you.